The government is committed to a legal ban on conversion therapy. That is, any kind of attempt, physical or verbal treatment, to stop people from being gay or trans. Right now, there is a consultation underway on the details of the law, but that comes to an end on the Friday of next week. As proposed, the law will allow consenting adults to have therapy of their choosing if the consequences are well understood, but not the under 18s. Now, this has long been promised, and many can't understand why it just hasn't been adopted as yet, but the proposed law as applied to trans people has found itself at the centre of some of the arguments around gender identity and biological sex, which we have been discussing sporadically on this programme. Nikki Da Costa is former Director of Legislative Affairs at Number 10 and has reservations about some of the details of this law. So I spoke to her earlier, and to begin with I asked what her view is on the proposed ban on conversion to therapy on the grounds of sexuality.
I have no views on this. I think I would identify that there is quite a network of laws. I think there's 7 or 8 laws already that provide quite a lot of protection, but I'm very happy to see further legislation in this space if it's useful.
Right. What is your concern then with the approach the government is taking?
My concern is that the bill, because it has evolved over time to now take in gender identity, is that the bill, in the desire to do good, risks a great deal of harm potentially to children because of the elements that address gender identity, particularly in relation to children.
Take me through a very specific hypothetical case where you could see a therapy being appropriate that would be illegal or on the boundaries of legality and thus may not be offered.
We have seen a huge rise in the number of children that identify as transgender. We know from the statistics that there are lots of complexities going on here. For example, there's a very high prevalence of autism. 2/3 of these are girls. And in addition, we know that many of those that feel gender dysphoria go on as adults to actually identify as lesbian or gay, and it's actually the complexity of same-sex attraction. So in all these situations, you could, though, have teenagers, and I remember being a teenager and being absolutely adamant that you could be absolutely adamant, I am trans. And in that situation, you could have parents or clinicians or a therapist. And if they were saying, let's really explore, slow down, we need to, really check what's happening here, because you may go on to then go down a medicalized pathway. And that's very different from saying you're gay or lesbian, and it's worth checking. In that situation, the law that is envisaged will say that if your intent was to change somebody to or from being trans, then you could see a situation where suddenly accusations might be leveled at those individuals, whether they're parents or clinicians, to say that they were actually engaging in conversion therapy, that they were getting in the way of this person being able to express their gender identity. And I think that's very worrying. The government's really, really rushing this legislation, and I'm saying that as somebody that has been in charge of the legislative programme for 4 years, and that rushing is likely to mean that you get it wrong.
I can hear people thinking you just want to kick the can down the road. You don't like this. You think it's too woke, and you just want to kick it away and delay it and believe that, put it into the long grass.
When somebody says, I object to pre-legislative scrutiny, which is when a committee of MPs and peers look at something, they call evidence. When people are nervous about further scrutiny, you have to ask the question, what are you afraid of that will come to light? Because this is only about adding a few more months into really making sure the legislation is good. Because the consequence, the alternative, is that you draft it so vaguely that the guinea pig will be whoever is hauled through the courts, whether that's a parent, whether that's a therapist, and they could be completely innocent and maybe exonerated at the end, but the legislation was so badly drafted that you've actually made a situation which didn't need to be. And therefore I say caution, because this really needs to be legislated for very carefully.